This is the way most of us were taught to think about cemeteries. Ghouls, goblins, the dead rising from their graves.
Infant Farley. You have to look all the way around on the stone sometimes, but there's a baby that's buried. Or even over 150 years old. They're very old, so these are historical artifacts. You are actually about cemeteries. Now,
sometimes when I look at the names on the gravestones.
I've been at the cemetery because
how old they were when they died, if they were young.
But this is
old,
what they're really
very
like.
Have a lamb sitting on top of the stone.
Peaceful,
They want that lamb signifying
inviting,
innocence or purity. And
not scary at all. We don't need to be protected from them. They need our protection at more than 20,000 cemetery sites in Indiana.
So the people who are buried in these cemeteries helped shape our state and why we are the way we are today. And so it's important for us to see that these sites are preserved and maintained so that they can be enjoyed by people in the future.
I think restoration is very, very good because that's history. I mean, you walk down through there and you can imagine these people, what they lived like, how they got here, their early lives.
The Whitechapel Cemetery is reminiscent of early settlers, primarily because of the names on the stones you see here. These are the first families who came in, generally from the South. They came in shortly after 1818 when this central part of Indiana was opened to settlement. They came in wagon trains or small trains of 2 or 3 wagons, very often riding horses sometimes. It was an arduous trip. They also had to bring cash with them to pay for the land. It was $1.25 an acre.
It's historical, and I think anybody ought to be interested in preserving the history of our area. I have 4 generations in here. I think the oldest ancestor I have buried in here died in 1870. They did such a good job in working on the cemetery as a whole that I actually bought a cemetery plot back here by one of my relatives, so I'm going to make the 5th generation in here.
This might be the only place that they can get the information that they need. So as even my own experience, I've had this, being from this community, and I've had a 5th generation family member that we couldn't find. And come to find out, as I went through my records, I located them at one of my cemeteries that I take care of.
Genealogists can learn a lot of information from the early tombstones. Often they gave the death date of the person and their age, and by subtracting you can get their definite birth date. And also you know that that person was in that locale at that time when they died. And usually the family members are buried nearby, and you can make associations and explore the possibility that these in fact are family relatives, and you can determine then what the relationship was to that person.
The pioneers lived without the modern technologies we have. But otherwise, they were much like us. They had close friends, They fell in love, married, and had children. They knew great happiness and tragedy. And ultimately, they died.
The first burial of record is a young 2-year-old girl named Elizabeth Hamer. She died at 2 years old, yet another indication of the horrendous child mortality rate of the time. There are, in fact, of record, 32 children buried in here. And if you count the stones that remain, that's nearly a third of the cemetery here. And it was said that children who lived beyond their 4th or 5th birthday, only then did they have a fair chance of surviving.
In the 1800s, there was not a funeral home or a funeral industry. When a death happened, the family was responsible for taking care of the body. So you might have someone die, and it would be the wife, the mother, the women of the family that would help to wash and prepare the body and place the body in the coffin, and it was placed there on some sort of a table or chair, sometimes a stand that would be put in the living room. They call them parlors. And it would be in your parlor so that people could come and view the body and pay their respects to the deceased and even set up overnight with the remains.
The carvings made on their tombstones tell us more about who these people were and what they believed in.
A lot of the meaning on tombstones is derived from both folk belief and religious beliefs. You have particularly a weeping willow, which would signify sorrow. It also symbolizes resurrection in that the weeping willow is rejuvenative. There were also symbols used like urns, and urns were usually symbols for adult graves. Most often for children's graves, you found doves, lambs, symbolizing innocence. Very often, if there were 2 infants that had died together, they might have one headstone with double lambs on top. You might have inverted torches, which would symbolize a life being snuffed out. And another light symbol would be an oil lamp, for example, and that would be lighting a passageway to a new place. Passageways were often symbolized through gates or arches. So if you have graves that show gates or arches, you're basically showing an opening into a new life, into a new place. An additional symbol would be an open book, for example. A closed book is often said to be the book of death. The life, for example, is over, so the book is closed.
The oldest tombstone I put together was 1810 as a child's marker. I've worked on like William Bratton's stone. He was with Lewis and Clark on their expedition. Many American Revolutionary soldiers and Civil War veterans. I'm pretty partial to my veterans. I like to make them shine again. Okay, when we first start a yard, we go over and we assess the damage that's been done and the repairs being needed.
Step 1. Take a photo of the stone and keep a record of how it was repaired.
Okay, now we have a condition where it's broken, 2 pieces. It's got moss and lichen on it. you can see this stone was broken in 3 or 4 pieces.
Step 2. Some stones can be cleaned with water and elbow grease, but others may require applying ammonia and water with a soft, natural brush.
So when we get the broken pieces clean, now we're ready to mend them back with our epoxy. You apply the epoxy to both surfaces.
Step 3. After the correct epoxy is applied, the stone is reattached to the foundation and clamped in place to dry.
And we will make sure we're lined up right. Okay. Apply some clamps. And we're ready for our next piece.
John has been doing this kind of work for over 30 years, so don't try it yourself until you've had some training.
You know, if this isn't worth saving, you know, we're going to stop, you know, throw the history books away, fire the history teachers, you know, it's just valuable stuff laying out here in these old yards. Epitaphs sometimes, you know, I like to read in the stones and get them clean, and some of the epitaphs, there's one stone, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but I thought it odd because the lady asked for forgiveness for the crimes that she had done. And it was a real old stone, you know, so you think to be worded, you know, was she a criminal, was she an old-time bank robber, murder, or whatever, but it was on a tombstone, was please forgive me for the crimes that I committed. So I thought that was strange, being on a 1860 monument.
This tombstone is the first tombstone. It's Wilkinson Farley. And the story behind this is when he was 17, he had a dream that he died and he was buried at a tree on this hill. And right here there used to be a tree. And he told his parents about the story. And then shortly after that, he died. And his father buried him at this exact spot that he dreamed. And after that, his father donated 2 acres of the land to public cemetery. And since then, it's expanded to about 4 acres.
When Cody first saw this pioneer cemetery, it was in bad shape. He decided to get his troop involved in restoring it.
Well, a lot of the headstones were leaned, knocked over, some were broken, some were just like flat on the ground. It just looked bad.
Not all tombstones need to be restored or replaced. Some simply need to be leveled. Pioneer cemeteries are worth saving. Think of it as the duty we owe to the daring pioneers who braved tremendous hardships to settle the land we live on today.